Good Tuesday afternoon. It is August 27th, 2019. We have two systems to talk about out in the Atlantic Basin. One, a named storm, that is Dorian, still a tropical storm. And on the heels of becoming our fifth named storm is Tropical Depression number 6 that will likely become Tropical Storm Aaron in the coming days. Broad overview of the Atlantic Basin right now. You see our two systems. The most impressive so far, and even that doesn't say too much, is Dorian. A minimal grade tropical storm right now has impacted the Leeward Islands within the last 12 hours. And the satellite presentation overall, we're looking at infrared imagery here, tells us the temperatures of the cloud tops. Convective activity, thunderstorm activity, not as widespread as it was, say, 24 hours ago when we last talked. Maybe a little bit of influence with the islands there, but also dry air taking its toll. But you look at the last couple of images here, the outflow of this system is very healthy looking, but it's combating that dry air. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit better detail in just a minute. It did impact the islands overnight, the Leeward Islands. We're looking at Martinique here, some of the wind observations on the ground. Some spots picked up wind gusts up to around 50 miles per hour. The center of Dorian actually moved directly over St. Lucia, the seventh named storm to do so since 1950, and they saw some wind gusts there up and around 50 miles per hour too. Overall, it's not a huge, massive, strong storm. However, the cloud field since yesterday has expanded by about 80 miles, now has a diameter of 360 miles. The average for a tropical system is around 300 miles in diameter. We switch up the satellite imagery to show you the filter of water vapor. This shows us the dry air and the moist air. Moist air around our tropical system here, but notice it is completely surrounded by dry air, and in the last couple of hours we're starting to see that dry air intrusion possibly taking place, and that's disrupting the overall flow of this system. So here's a look at the visible satellite imagery. It's a little more evident here when you see the thinning of the cloud tops here. You can almost see down to the sea surface. That's a possible dry air intrusion getting pulled in from the south, despite a healthy outflow off towards the west. There are watches and there are warnings still up. The northern parts of the Leeward Islands under that tropical storm watch. Warnings now up, tropical storm warnings for Puerto Rico and portions of the Dominican Republic over the next 36 hours. That means that the warning means that those tropical storm conditions are certainly a possibility, and in fact imminent. We do have aircraft out in the system. They've been flying missions on and off for the last 24 hours. First, it was the NOAA aircraft. Now the U.S. Air Force Reserve Hurricane Hunter aircraft has been flying recon missions. These are low-level flights to get wind data and to see the whole overall setup of the storm. They're staging out of Curacao and flying their missions into the storm from there. They deploy sensors into the storms, and we're looking at 10 full-time and 10 part-time crews overall within the entire squadron operated by the U.S. Air Force Reserve. Now, here's a look at their most recent mission. They found winds of around 50 miles per hour and a central pressure lowering just a very tiny bit, 1,003 millibars. Now, that's right in line with the National Hurricane Center recent update as of 2 o'clock, which puts the system at 50 mile per hour sustained winds directly from that Hurricane Hunter aircraft mission, with winds gusting up to 65 miles per hour. Not a major change at all in terms of the overall forecast track. Really, over the last 36 hours, the models have been very consistent on the track. What's tricky with this system is the intensity. There are a lot of variables, a lot of players on the field here that could influence it either way, stronger or weaker. One I really want to talk about here is the overall geography of the part of the world that it is currently located. We're going to be looking at an area here in the next couple days that it will be moving towards, that it could either tear it apart or help it survive. We have mountains over the Dominican Republic, mountains over Puerto Rico. However, there is a safe passage here that a lot of models are putting it passing right over. That's like threading a needle. If, in fact, it does make it to the Mona Passage, that's what this is called, from the Dominican Republic over to Puerto Rico, thanks to Mona Island right there, it may keep enough of its structure intact and not torn apart from the mountains that once it moves into the Bahamas, that the overall environment there is much more favorable. We could see a stronger system as a result. Here's how the models are seeing things. These are just the tropical models here. Each line you're seeing is a different computer model. Notice a lot of them put it threading that needle through the Mona Passage and erupting into the Bahamas as possibly a stronger system at that point. And then the consistency continues, heading towards the northwest, towards the east coast of Florida by the second half of the Labor Day holiday weekend. Now let's look at the ensembles. An ensemble is the same model, in this case, the GFS. 21 members in this ensemble. We run the same model 21 times, tweaking very small little variations to see if the overall outcome is a little bit different. Okay, so here's how the GFS sees it. It tends to shift it a little bit farther towards the west and southwest, over the Dominican Republic, over the very mountainous region there, meaning it would get torn apart if, in fact, it does track that way. The European model ensembles, which I can't pull up here, but those actually trend it right on through the Mona Passage and a more favorable position for it to maintain its structure. But overall, all of these showing it heading towards Florida or even possibly into the Gulf. That variation, the farther out you get in the future, which is why the cone of uncertainty grows in diameter the farther out you go, because things diverge. Well, you know, this whole area in the yellow is really should be watching the forecast as we head into a very vacation-oriented, beach-oriented long holiday weekend. The Gulf Coast and the southeastern parts of the United States could certainly see some sort of impacts from this, but most importantly, the east coast of Florida that is now within that cone of uncertainty as we get into Saturday, Sunday, and Monday on Labor Day. Here's how the overall two models look at things, the GFS and the European models, the global models. What you're going to see here, the red lines are the European model, the yellow lines is the GFS. Notice the remarkable consistency with these in terms of the center of Dorian as we go through the forecast period here. However, the intensity is what differs. As we get out to around Wednesday night at 10 p.m., we're starting to near the Mona Passage here, or possibly a track over the Dominican Republic. There's the center, the GFS has it. There's the center of the European, right in the center of that Mona Passage. We move a little farther out in time. Here we are by Thursday evening. We are now emerging into the Bahamas, as the European shows it kind of a weakish storm, but a little stronger than what the GFS is plotting. We get out to Friday evening. The European shows a stronger system. GFS still, it's an okay storm. But as we near the weekend and head into Saturday afternoon, we're looking at a pretty decent-sized system there, according to the European, and the possibilities there by Sunday afternoon of a landfalling tropical system at some intensity, right near Daytona Beach or anywhere really along the east coast of Florida needs to watch this closely. This is just one model run for the GFS and Euro. It'll certainly change between now and then, but that is a possibility by that time frame. Overall, the atmosphere isn't all that conducive. We have a little bit of wind shear to worry about. We also have the dry air, but the sea surface temperatures are really in play here because they are well above where they should be, around a degree or so above average. To you and me, that really doesn't mean anything, but for a hurricane or a tropical system, that's just that much more energy that it has to use to develop and strengthen. I'm going to switch it up now and show you here. Everything that's shaded, I know it's kind of hard to see, but the brighter colors is sea surface temperatures that are above 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's really the minimal temperature you need for latent heat release, tropical development, and we're like in the mid-80s through much of the forecast track all the way up to the coast of Florida. However, wind shear, it has been relatively low for the past couple of days, which is why Dorian has been able to maintain its overall structure and ward off a lot of that dry air. But as we go into the future, there could be some instances of some moderate wind shear. Overall, the wind shear environment is not entirely detrimental. What is wind shear? Well, hurricanes are vertical systems, right? They need to be vertically stacked from the surface all the way well up into the atmosphere to breathe. There's inflow at the surface, outflow at top. But when you have a change in speed and wind direction as you get higher up in the sky, it begins to tilt the system. It blows the tops off of developing thunderstorm clouds, and it disrupts the overall wind flow and in turn starts to destroy the system. So high wind shear, bad for tropical systems. Here's there's more. We have one other system to talk about here. Tropical depression number 6. You can see it here on the satellite imagery. I mean, it's not near any land masses, and the loop shows it pretty much stationary, although the forward movement, according to the Hurricane Center, is to the north at 2 miles per hour. Does spare the east coast of the United States, some rough surf possibly up through New England as we get into the Labor Day holiday weekend, but it does set its sights possibly just to the east of Nova Scotia and into the Canadian Maritimes. At this point, a remnant low or possibly even something subtropical or post-tropical at that point in time. Again, this is kind of a non-headline maker storm. As we look farther out into the future looks active in the Atlantic. Why? Well, we have a lot of seeds coming into the atmosphere, coming off of Africa. There's a very strong African easterly jet here, and we have easterly waves, tropical waves, moving along Africa and heading into the main development region of the Atlantic. We're heading into the time of year that this really starts to light up. Dorian was the first system coming out of there. And with the warm ocean temperatures and eventually a lot of rising motion and a little bit more moist air, we could see some development happening there as we get into the middle to end of next week. So we'll likely be talking much more here on social media. If you have any questions, you can always find me on Facebook or on Twitter. And of course, remember to subscribe to this YouTube page for further updates.